to say. I think we have a very exciting 2 days ahead of us. When I look through the program, I see so many interesting presentations. And in fact, within the chair, we have recently been trying to think about what should we do for the next 5 years. So this is the last 5-year cycle of the chair on industrial development. So we've been trying to create a strategy which we have chosen to frame around the idea of sustainable industrial development, where sustainability, of course, has multiple meanings. So both environmental and social and economic sustainability included in that. And when I look through the presentations, I can just see how much alignment there is between what's being discussed in this conference and what we want to achieve in the chair. So I'm very happy to see the interest of you guys, our stakeholders. So I think, well, we should say welcome to everybody who is online. We have several people who are joining individually, but we also have several satellites around the world. So we have people joining from Nigeria, from Kenya, from Ghana, from Benin, and from Namibia. So those of you who are in the satellites, also a very warm welcome to you. I'm very happy that we managed to pull off this kind of arrangement. I think it's quite innovative that we are having this satellite format for the conference. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of interesting presentations, but we also have, of course, a keynote, which I will get to just in a minute. And we also have, on tomorrow afternoon, we will have a panel debate. I will be involved in this, and several of my colleagues who have been contributing to a recent special edition of the OPEC Funds magazine on innovation. So we are discussing some of the articles that we wrote in this special edition, and we will be discussing the role about innovation and technology in industrial development, discussing different sectors and cultural industry sectors, and so on. So stick around for that. It will be very interesting. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I just want to say thanks a lot to Phumzile. I don't know if you can see her where you are. She's standing here in the back of the room. Phumzile has really been the one who has organized the big thanks. I think after the conference ends tomorrow, we'll give you a big round of applause. For now, I just
say a massage voucher.
Well, anything is possible. And of course, also Pat Lego, who has been assisting you in setting this up. Now, without further ado, I think we should move into the keynote presentation. I think we are very lucky and very privileged to have Carlo Pietrobelli here with us online. So Carlo is an esteemed scholar and policy actionist, I would say, in the field of especially global value chains, but very much the intersection of global value chains and industrial development with his, I'm sure you will be talking quite a lot about the mineral sector, where Carlo is certainly one of the leading global experts on that. So Carlo has a PhD from Oxford University. He has worked in many different places, including the Inter-American Development Bank. He is based at UNU Merit. You can see on his slide backgrounds that he has the UNU logo there, where he's leading the UNESCO chair on, so what is it called? The UNESCO, you will have to tell in a moment, Carlo. UNESCO chair on Latin American industrial development. And he's also, of course, based at the University of Johannesburg in Rome. So Carlo will today be talking about institutional capabilities for global value chains policy. And as I mentioned, Carlo is one of these people who is a very esteemed scholar, but he has an in-depth hands-on knowledge in terms of working with people on the ground in the domains of policy making, industry representation groups, NGOs, and so on. So he's really working with the people who are doing policy and not just, writing about it. So I think this is an excellent topic for the lecture today. And with those words, I want to hand over to you, Carlo. Thanks so much for joining us. So I think we will try to, if you could do this in about 45 minutes, then we will leave about 20 minutes or 15 minutes or so for questions for you. So thanks a lot for joining, Carlo, again, and over to you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rasmus. And thank you, organizers of this wonderful conference. I'm really excited to see so many faces and so many names and hear that so many people are being connected from different countries in Africa. Rasmus presented my work. I'm very happy of the way he explained what I had been doing over my career. I started my studies at Oxford. I studied under Sanjay Lal, an amazing development economist that helped me very much understand the issues related to technological development in developing countries and enterprise development. And then I ventured into what influences technological development in firms in many different contexts, where firms are being characterized by belonging to clusters, by being located in different places, where places exert an amazing influence on technological development and upgrading, and then into this big topic of global value chains, on which we've been writing extensively. With Rasmus, we've been writing in several instances, trying to emphasize the relationship between value chains and innovation. And finally, throughout my career, I've always tried to combine solid academic research with policy advice, with policy making. Indeed, the chair, the UNESCO chair I'm holding now is named Science, Technology and Innovation Policy for Latin America. It really has an influence on policy and policy making, which is based on solid empirical research and solid evaluations of what policies can do and how policies need to be shaped and designed. And today I'm very happy I'll be able to present a little bit of my thinking and recent research on policies related to value chains, and specifically on the how of industrial policies, and not necessarily not only on what policies should do, but how policies should be designed and how policies should be implemented. And in that regard, I think that the crucial issue is a focus on institutions and a focus on capabilities, what institutions need to be able to do, and what do they need to invest in order to acquire these capabilities and develop a capacity to design and implement effective policies for value chains. I will make use of a PowerPoint. Let me try to share with you. All right. I can tell you that also that part of the results of the presentation I'm giving today are published in a forthcoming already available paper on world development, which is part of a special issue that we're editing with Rasmus on how value chains in the world are responding to the challenge of green transformation, of sustainability, of geopolitical fragmentation, and changes in the organization of value chains. Let me start with the puzzle. We know, and you know better than me, that Africa has many industrial strategies, many investment promotion agencies, SEZ, special economic zones, are available in most countries. There's plenty of industrial parks. There's plenty of laws, regulations on local content, given the huge availability of natural resources and extractive resources in Africa. So a lot of things are being done in Africa. Yet outcomes differ very sharply. Different countries have different degrees of success. Different countries are implementing these policies, these instruments in different ways, and they get very different results. And the results, in my opinion, do not depend so much on this debate on having a strong state, having a weak state, or having a system which is more based on markets, or a system based more on states and government, or countries having and looking for the ideal policy institution, the institution that should be in charge of designing and implementing policies. And I know all countries are wondering what to do and how to design the best institution, the best possible institution in the world, and going around and looking at different models. I don't think the issue is this. The issue is further whether this policy institution has the right capacity for the specific GVC task. So my answer is tries to be very specific. In order to have functioning institutions that design and implement policies successfully, the institution needs to nurture and develop the right capacity for the specific GVC task. And I will try to make this argument in the course of the lecture. Let me start by reminding us all that GVCs, in spite of geopolitical fragmentations and so on, are still very relevant and are still governing a lot of international trade. These are very recent data from the Asia Development Bank that reveal again that the GVC trade, that trade occurring through value chains, represent a large percentage share of total exports. This data set did not have data on Africa. I managed to get some preliminary evidence from the World Bank WITS database, which updates country economic situations throughout the world. And for sub-Saharan Africa, GVC-related trade, which is a different concept from the concept which was behind the previous diagram, but still a way to measure to what extent international trade is related to a GVC way of organizing international industrial relations. We see that most African countries have a sizable percentage of their trade which is related to a GVC way of functioning. The average of these statistics for all these 39 sub-Saharan African countries is about 39%. The median is 38, and the country has the lowest participation in GVC still has 1/4 of its international trade going through this mechanism, whereas small countries that intensively trade internationally, such as Lesotho or Eswatini, Mauritius and others, have a much larger percentages from 55 to 50, 48, and so on. So in a nutshell, GVC still represent a remarkable share of international trade, also in sub-Saharan Africa. What is the idea of GVCs? I know that several papers in the conference have been addressing this issue of GVCs. Let me remind very briefly. I think this diagram came from a paper that Rasmus published some time ago, where the idea is very simple. There's a sequence of activities, and firms can specialize in different segments of the sequence of activities, and through specialization, they gain remarkable economies, and this improves the overall functioning and the overall efficiency of the production process, which is carried out by different firms, often in different countries. There's a process of geographical fragmentation of economic activities, which follows the principle of functional integration. So there are actors that manage to govern and structure the relationships among the different participants in the chain. So in a nutshell, the new elements brought forward by the GVC approach have to do with the emergence of leading firms, the emergence of networks of firms, the existence of buyers, global buyers that organize the production activities of many firms in many different countries. And they do that in order to buy and then sell and organize production and trade of many different actors. And research on GVC has also emphasized the role of governance, so the kind of hierarchies, the kind of relationships that occur among different participants in value chains. And of course, power exerts a relevant influence in the functioning of value chains, as well as non-production activities. I mean, the literature on value chains has emphasized that what matters is not anymore, not only manufacturing, actual processing of activities, but also designing and organizing and developing and designing new products and processes, and the research phase and the pre-competitive research, as well as the close-to-market activities, which are more related to the trading and marketing and entering different markets. So a lot of different activities can help countries and firms to add value. And the challenge is, of course, to understand how this value is really shared among different participants. So today, in the half an hour I still have for my lecture, I will try to, first of all, tell you a little bit of what I consider GVC-oriented policies, and present an empirical taxonomy that we obtained with different colleagues on the basis of the empirical evidence of different countries implementing different policies related to value chains. And then I start asking the question, which I think is the most relevant one: how GVC policies can be designed, how they can be implemented, what is the role of capabilities in institutions, what are the institutions that can perform better in this effort of designing and implementing policies. And I will end with some case studies that can illustrate a little bit the kind of reasoning I'm developing in my research. GVC-oriented policies. If you're interested in deepening the issue, there's a series of research papers that we started with my colleagues and friends, Roberto Rabelotti and Ari Van Haschen. There's this paper that came out in the Journal of International Business Policy 4 years ago, which is an effort to condense a lot of empirical evidence and different case studies coming from many different countries. This was the introductory piece of a special issue where we received more than 40 different papers on cases of GVC-oriented policies that had to do with GVCs in one way or another. And we managed to develop a taxonomy, which is relatively simple. You see the summary of this taxonomy in this table. We managed to see and detect the existence of policies aimed at enhancing participation in value chains, policies aiming at capturing value, which is different from participating. It's actually getting larger shares of rents created in the value chains. And we also observed that over the last few years, a number of policies related to improving the inclusiveness of GVCs have emerged. There's been a rising recognition that a lot of GVCs have been creating inequalities and injustice, and have not the benefits of GVCs have not spilled over on local populations. So a number of countries have been implementing inclusiveness policies, trying to improve the social and environmental conditions in value chains. And finally, in the years of the pandemic and the spread of viruses, the spread of wars and trade wars and actual war and so on, a number of countries have been working to strengthen the resilience of their value chains, to strengthen their capacity to deal with value chains being fragmented or being reshored to different locations, and in spite of that, managing to maintain an effectively working value chain. So 4 big categories of value chains which respond and use different tools. In the rest of the presentation, I will focus on the first 2 categories mainly: participation policies and policies to capture value along value chains. And the actual tools that we observed in our research are, for example, as far as participation policies are concerned, policies aimed at removing obstacles to trade, creating a favorable business environment, fostering market competition, improving infrastructure for trade and value chain participation, improving general education, improving training, general training. So in a way, helping local firms get access and participate in value chains through improving physical infrastructure, including, of course, the so important broadband and digital infrastructures that are needed today, as well as the physical transport and logistic infrastructure, and the conditions that determine how easy it is for a firm to get access and participate in value chains. And a second category of chains that aim at capturing value, which I repeat is not the same as participating, because the value and the rents created in the chain are distributed along the chain in different ways, depending on many different circumstances, including the governance of the chain, as well as the innovation and technological capabilities of local firms. So policies aiming at strengthening local innovation, strengthening entrepreneurship systems, improving specific infrastructures aimed at helping some firms and such sectors operate, developing specific skills that are needed for that specific chain and that are necessary to interact with lead firms, with buyers, with different tiers of different buyers, as well as developing all the linkages that need to be strengthened between research centers, training centers, GVC firms, small local enterprises, as well as lead firms, and so on. So a number of different elements. As one element I would like to especially underline, which is all the business services related to the quality infrastructure of a country, that include norms, metrology institutions, quality certification, accreditation of laboratories and working laboratories in different countries, the certifications that need to be obtained and be consistent with international standards, all these elements which are increasingly relevant for international trade. So 2 big categories. These 2 categories, briefly on this, they respond to different economic justification, different economic logic. Participation policies tend to be more consistent with the traditional, we used to call it Washington consensus policies, horizontal policies, reducing market distortions, helping, there was a literature talking about and writing about establishing a level playing field so that firms could compete on the same turf without being disadvantaged by existing conditions. So essentially helping markets work. And the second type of GVC-oriented policies aimed at capturing value is instead justified more in line with the theoretical discourse justifying vertical policies and acknowledging that there are notable power asymmetries between different firms in the chain. There's different levels of uncertainty, there's costs and risks that are intrinsic in value chain working, and there's often coordination failures occurring among firms that need to be remedied in order to help local firms interact with different tiers of buyers and suppliers. So a number of justifications that tend to be less orthodox than the previous ones and much more sector-specific, eventually firm-specific, and aiming at specific obstacles and failures in markets and in interfirm cooperation. So this is what we try to classify. We developed this taxonomy. We've been analyzing different GVC-oriented policies. But if you look at the table where I showed you some typical tools which are employed in GVC-oriented policies, you could ask yourself, but we've seen it already. We know what this is about. We know that competition policy is a standard tool for economic policies. We know that supplier development programs have been in place for many years. Innovation, promotion, technological capabilities, enhancing, and so on. So is this something new? Is this really different from the past? And our research led us to think that there's at least three elements which make these GVC-oriented policies different and new. First of all, policies need to focus on tasks, need to focus on specific functions within the chain. So the concept of sectors is not adequate any longer. Policies cannot refer to entire sectors. They need to focus on specific functions, specific tasks within a value chain, and therefore the effort of policymakers need to be much more granular, much more specific, and focus on specific functions. A second novel characteristic of GVC-oriented policies in our mind is that much more emphasis needs to be devoted to linkages. It's not anymore firms developing their own capacities in isolation, but firms developing together with and linking up with other actors and other firms and so on. So developing really networks and relationships within chains, and policies need to focus on this element as well. And finally, I think there's a need for a very strong focus on at the enterprise level. Enterprise level meaning looking at the logic of lead firms and what determines their behavior in different countries, and looking at the logic of local enterprises and different tiers of enterprises that interact, collaborate, invest in different directions, and follow their firms' specific incentives and objectives. So really, this trifecta of GVC-oriented policies, which make them different from the past, focusing on tasks, focusing on linkages, and focusing on at the enterprise level. If we deepen a little bit the analysis of these two types of value chain-oriented policies, that is, the policies aiming at participating and attracting lead firms to operate in our countries, or policies aiming at enhancing the value captured by local enterprises, I try to portray this trade-off, this debate, this possible complementarities or contradictions between these two types of GVCs. On the horizontal axis, participation policies; on the vertical axis, policies aimed at capturing value. And we see that sometimes trade-offs can emerge. So look at the left-hand side of this diagram. There's this red circle focusing on local content policies, which are often justified in terms of enhancing the capacity of local firms to capture value. But at the same time, this may induce a problem in GVC participation because firms could be scared off by these policies, there could be too many restrictions and obligations that need to be respected, and therefore the objective of attracting and participating could be hindered in this process. Or if you move to the right-hand side, to the opposite extreme, and think, for example, of different ways of attracting foreign buyers and foreign investors, like, for example, offering subsidized loans or unconditional tax rebates for foreign direct investment, which is a policy that's been implemented in many countries in Africa and elsewhere. This is likely to attract investors, but at the same time, what is the value capture that is generated out of that? I mean, it may be minimal in some cases. There would need to be specific policies and tools to be implemented in order to help local firms capture value within the chain. So, two contrasting alternatives, a trade-off which is outlined here. Whereas if you look at the blue circle in the middle of this diagram on the 90 degrees, on the 45 degrees curve, then we see that, for example, policies such as centers developing specific skills or subsidies for innovation and upgrading in local firms can be examples of policies that simultaneously aim at attracting foreign investors and foreign buyers, enhancing participation by local enterprises, as well as helping these firms to add local content and capture value. And same for the improved quality infrastructure I mentioned before, this set of institutions and rules and organizations that help firms comply with quality standards, which make them liable to export or interact fruitfully along value chain. So there can be a problem of complementarities versus alternatives of these different policies and trade-offs that sometimes need to be assessed whenever the government is focusing and devising what specific GVC-oriented policies should be implemented. The big issue, which I emphasized at the beginning, is that even if we agree to some extent on what needs to be done on the actual content of policies, there's much less agreement on the how. And specifically, there's very little lessons, very little recipes in helping firms to define how to design and implement policies. And this is especially true for GVC-oriented policies, because these are difficult policies. These policies involve a lot of different actors, governments at different levels, different kinds of businesses. They often intersect many different sectors. The value chain is itself an arrangement which involves firms operating in different sectors with different technologies, often occurring across countries, in multiple countries, with different interests, with different desires and objectives, with different power along the chain, where a lot of coordination is needed, and so on. So all these elements make GVC-oriented policies very difficult. And what I'd like to emphasize here is that what really matters and what makes policies different and makes policies achieve results with different degrees is that institutions in charge of designing and implementing policies are different, and they need to have the right capabilities. This discussion is a little bit in line with the long-standing discussion on the role of institutions in development. There's famous authors such as Douglas North or Danny Roderick and others that have been advocating the need for getting institutions right, arguing that institutions matter. But in my mind, there's been a little progress, too little progress, I would say, in defining the nature and the shape of these institutions. there's often the temptation of focusing and trying to devise the best ideal type of institution. Whereas my proposal here, which I back with some research and empirical evidence, is that instead of defining ideal types, governments should start by identifying actual challenges, actual tasks, need specific actions that need to be undertaken, and figure out the specific capabilities required to accomplish these tasks. And this is important because policy tasks have very different levels of difficulty. Let me give you an example. Look at the arrows there, these two red arrows here. And there are measures such as setting input tariffs or setting interest rates. You know, the central bank is defining what should be the appropriate level of interest rates. This is probably a highly technical decision, which can be very difficult, and central bankers typically equip themselves with highly qualified technical teams to define what the right level of interest rate should be. And they make a decision and they apply the measure as if it were a stroke of a pen. I mean, the central banker will sign a decree and the interest rate will be set at that level. So technically difficult, but the difficulty is very different from, take the opposite example, maintaining, investing, constructing, and then maintaining rural roads in a developing country, in a rural country with a substantial role of the rural economy in the country. And these kinds of policies are relatively simple from a technical point of view. So it's well known there's engineering competencies that are available and know how to build and maintain a rural road. But a rural road goes through many different territories and many different villages and cuts across many different weathers and rain and sun and people. So there's a lot of coordination that needs to be achieved among the different villages and along this territory. So maintaining it and implementing this policy of developing and maintaining rural roads is difficult for a different reason from setting interest rates. And if I were to give you some examples and discuss a little bit this point, which is crucial for my understanding and for my presentation, we see examples of policies that are sort of a stroke of a pen, and others that are very difficult because they imply a lot of coordination. There's several actors involved. Think of, say, implementing local content policies, which is technically relatively easy. I mean, the objective is clear. I mean, we want foreign investors to buy locally and to add value locally. But the interactions among multiple actors, multinational corporations, local enterprises, local authorities and institutions make it difficult, and there's a very relevant demand for coordination. And there's also, it is also difficult because it needs to be, the awareness of the usefulness of this policy needs to be raised. The suppliers' capabilities need to be created, need to be strengthened in order to make all this process of enhancing global content successful. So different degrees and different reasons for difficulties. Policy tasks in the end are not undifferentiated technical challenges, but require appropriate institutional capacities. And if we continue on that and we think of the specific nature of GVC-oriented policies and the capabilities to carry out these policies, there are different reasons for the difficulty of different tasks. For example, the number of policy actors. The larger the number of policy actors, the more difficult the implementation of the policy will be, And the capabilities required will be the capabilities of monitoring the actions of these different actors. Similarly, with the length of the implementation of the policy, the longer the implementation period is, the more institutions in charge of designing and implementing this policy should improve their credibility, improve their monitoring capabilities. There's another element that needs to be considered when assessing the difficulty of different tasks in different GVC-oriented policies, which is related to the distributional consequences. So who bears the costs and who gains the benefits of these policies? And in some cases, in GVCs, the costs are borne by few. The benefits of a well-working and a value chain bring benefits to local enterprises are enjoyed by many. So there's a need for constant consultations, monitoring, enhancing the credibility of the institutions in charge of this policy, and raising awareness among the various different actors involved in the policy. The visibility, I mean, there are cases where governments explicitly try to enhance the visibility of their policies in order to improve the credibility and therefore help enterprises and help policies carry out being implemented. And of course, behind all these efforts, there's huge information and knowledge, I should say, requirements, because a lot of this information is tacit, is specific, is GVC specific, and we know that lots of consultations and well-structured dialogue need to be in place. In order to illustrate these principles, I will, in the few minutes that remain in my lecture, I will try to give you some examples and discuss a little bit of examples from different countries. These are cases. You have the details in the World Development Paper, and I'm adding more evidence on African cases, looking at how different institutions have been related to GVC-oriented policies, and asking myself and trying to research a bit on the capabilities that the different institutions have been developing in order to implement policies successfully. The sample is not representative, is purposeful. It's a sample of cases that help me illustrate and test the theoretical expectations. And you see, I have cases from many different emerging countries. Let us quickly jump to some of these cases. There's one very interesting experience that comes from Peru, where the then Minister for the Economy, Piero Ghezzi, launched in 2010 an effort to develop a modern industrial policy in order to address the typical problem that Peruvian economic policies have been facing for many years. That is the lack of coordination, the frequent overlaps, the missing linkages among different government actors. And he had the idea, this minister was coming from the private sector, and he tried to do something pragmatic, something concrete, that is to convene public-private working groups aiming at identifying and eliminating bottlenecks that would affect the productivity of a specific sector. So different groups, different, they are called, in Spanish, they're called mesas ejecutivas, which is literally a table of executives which are committed to obtain a pragmatic result and regularly meet. And they were created in different sectors to address different specific problems. They turned into real ways of working, learning, doing, building. So convening different actors, having a secretariat providing detailed technical knowledge on the problems to assess, bringing to the fore the needs of business as well as the needs of different actors and communities, focusing on specific problems, specific bottlenecks, coordinating, convening, gaining credibility because results were obtained quickly and were very specific, and based on the idea that there's no best model, and if a solution to that specific productivity problem cannot be found, then different efforts need to be made, and the process needs to go again and again, and the executive board needs to meet again, and they actually met regularly, more than once a month, with high technical skills and expertise, and they managed to obtain substantial improvements in regulations, which are behind the export success of different sectors in Peru. Peru in 10 years became the second largest exporter of asparagus in the world. It has an amazing production of fish, which managed to reach international markets thanks to these efforts of coordinating and convening and focusing on specific issues and specific problems. Something similar I started studying is the Ethiopian case of the Hawassa Industrial Park that was launched in 2016, was initially anchored by this large garment company, PVH, and then attracted several other companies from different countries. The expectation is that we'll end up employing more than 60,000 workers, and the Ethiopian Investment Commission is behind the organization of the park. It ensures coordination between firms and between local entities and training organizations existing in the park. It has performed a very useful role of GVC attraction. Looking at secondary evidence, one realizes that in some cases attraction did not go together with value capture. So the second leg of the GVC-oriented policies was not fully achieved. Foreign firms have been attracted to the park, but some work remains to be done in order to help local firms capture value, advance in the value chain, upgrade, and get access to larger rents. A different experience comes from Kenya, the flower and horticulture exports. And that's an example of a GVC-oriented policy aimed at capturing value through quality, standards, compliance, strengthening the quality infrastructure of the country, having institutions such as the Tjhis, which is the National Plant Protection Organization, helping to introduce international standards into local practices, and together with the business associations, the Kenya Flower Councils, and others, help local firms gain awareness of the relevance of these quality standards, getting access to services, helping them to comply with these requirements, and therefore not only getting access to larger and longer value chains, but also capturing values, so entering into high value segments of the cut flower and horticulture export value chain. A fourth example of a totally different nature, but something that comes from Malaysia and that focuses on advanced technology sector, comes from a specific area of Malaysia, the Penang Peninsula, where over the years the effort has been to move from a simple GVC attraction policy to a policy of adding value and capturing value in the chain, and that happened through the joint work of government and business, engaging the foreign investors that were initially firms such as Hewlett-Packard and Intel and Motorola at the end of the 1980s, and then involving university, business, the government, to develop the appropriate institutions and the capabilities required to be able to implement the required GVC-oriented institutions. So the Penang Skills Development Center was created. The Penang Development Center was also created later, and this enabled local firms to interact better with foreign buyers, with multinational corporations, and helping local firms capture more value in the chain. Fifth, I have two more examples, and then I'll conclude. This example from Australia is very interesting because it has a different nature, because it is related to an institution that was created by the Australian government to help the country benefit from the implementation of a bilateral international trade agreement. The one that was signed with Indonesia in July 2020, a comprehensive trade agreement, where the Australian government funded a project to promote dialogue, discuss standards, coordinate across countries on trade logistics, border protection and management, product health and safety, foreign investment, the movement of people and skills, and so on. And the institution developed strong technical skills. The benefits of the trade agreement were distributed among a large number of different actors. And an element that helped the institution develop the appropriate capabilities was the relationship with the international trade agreement and the need to move fast, to operate as fast as possible, because the trade agreement had come into effect, and therefore there was a need to really develop the different institutions needed to, and the capabilities needed to capture the value that the international trade agreement could offer. And finally, another case, you're more expert than me, I'm sure in the audience there's several people who have been studying this case in Botswana, diamond beneficiation, but secondary evidence reveals that there have been a number of actors and institutions that helped develop very, very tight partnerships between government, multinational corporations, the bears, essentially developing public-private companies and developing the necessary skills, and through negotiations, negotiating, obtaining a larger role inside the value chain. So much so that the bears in 2013 relocated its rough diamond sales activity to Gaborone. So it's a global activity that was located to Botswana. And that allowed the country to not only enter into the chain, but also capture more value from the chain. I can probably skip over this. And let me just jump to the conclusions here. I'd like to leave you with a message. And the message is that the lesson for sub-Saharan Africa is not that governments should simply build more agencies, build more industrial parks, develop more presidential councils or competitiveness councils, and so on. The lesson is a bit sharper. GVC policies succeed when institutions can perform the exact task the chain requires. So it's not an effort to develop the perfect and the ideal institutions, but really to understand what tasks need to be executed in the GVC policy and develop the capabilities and the institutions required to perform these tasks. Sometimes the task is attracting a lead firm. Other times is certifying a flower or negotiating with a diamond buyer, or helping small suppliers meeting a global standard. So the institutional form can vary, but what matters are the required capacities that are needed to implement specific tasks. And more in general, there's no one size fits all recipe of GVC-oriented policies. I propose a detailed effort to understand the specific capacities that institutions need to have to implement the appropriate policies for a GVC oriented task. It's important to design and understand how to design and implement policies and develop the appropriate capabilities. So the search for a good fit between capacities and tasks, between the tasks that need to be executed and the capacities required to implement this task, I think it is essential. Thank you very much. I'll stop here, and thanks again for inviting me, and happy to share ideas and hear your comments. Thank you.
Okay, Carlo, thank you so much for this lecture. As always, extremely eloquent, and I think also very systematic in the way that you proceed in unfolding your ideas, and also I think perfect with these illustrations from around the world, many different contexts, to illustrate your ideas. So I was really impressed by this lecture, and in fact very inspired. I have lots of thoughts. I don't know if we have time to discuss them all now. Maybe we can also discuss some offline at a later point. But you really provoked, at least in my mind, a lot of thoughts and a lot of questions. And I can see there's also already a lot of questions online, including some long and complex questions. So we need some time, I think, to discuss your lecture here. So I think we should try to allocate about half an hour or so for questions and answers. It means that we will be eating in a little bit to the next session. Now, the session where I will be attending after, we only have 2 papers and we have 2 hours. So I think that is ample time. In the other session, we have 3 papers, and so that will still be half an hour for each paper. So I think we will not be mean to those who are presenting and squeezing them out. I think we have time for both this discussion and the next session. So what I would like to do is I would like to first give privilege, so to speak, to the satellites. So I know there were some questions. I don't see them on my screen, but maybe you can help a little bit, Gumsile. So let's give preference first to some of the satellites. I saw there was something popping up from Kenya just before. And then we will, after that, we will proceed to, I guess, we can do the individuals who are also online, and then we can see if there are questions also from this room or next door. So can you please take us through the questions that were posted in the chat? And in fact, we can invite people from the satellites to take the floor.
Yeah. Nairobi, Kenya satellite, do you perhaps want to read or speak about your question?
Could you please introduce yourselves when you start?
Hi, Timothy. There seems to be a question in the chat from your satellite. We're just asking if whoever asked the question could just speak into the mic and raise the question online, verbally. If you can hear me.
So why don't we move to Mohammed? I can see, Mohammed, you have raised your hand. So let's move to you, Mohammed, and then we can see if we can get the Nairobi team online.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carlo, for this great presentation. I honestly am Mohammed Abdel Samia. I'm a PhD researcher at TU Delft, Netherlands. And I'm really affected by your thoughts in global value chain and industrial development in general. That's why I will take the talk directly to the conclusion where you mentioned that how to design and implement policies, etc. I honestly have one paper. I will present it later in the next session. It's also affected by this exact lecture you have given right now. It's about specific functions in global value chains. So I'm taking it about resource industrialization. The question is here, I think you, in the lecture, there is underestimating the power of resources or power of function in general, or the actors. For example, you are mentioning lead firms here, and the government or institution have the role to coordinate or enforce this credibility of policies. But in general, your example, for example, for Botswana, we are underestimating the power of resource we are dealing with diamond. If we're talking about another resource which have a very low market power, the state doesn't have this much influence in the global value chain in general. They cannot attract what you like make some distinguishing between value capture and coordination. So in our theoretical, we are putting like very good power about the market power in general. We are dealing in global value chain. And you mentioned that in one paper, I think it's about mining policy have to be stage specific. So here we need to be specific about which global value chain and which power we are discussing in order to let institution activate it. Thank you so much. So I want to mention also, is it right what I'm saying here that underestimating the power of value chain in general could differentiate the role of state? Thank you so much.
Say Nairobi.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Mohammed. Now let's move over to the Nairobi team.
Yes, Nairobi, we are ready. My name is Maurice Odhiambo. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I have a question. My question goes like this. Your framework emphasizes that institution capabilities must be aligned with the specific complexity and coordination requirement of different GVC-oriented policy tasks. Given that my development countries face several resources constraints and institutional weakness, how will you operationalize and diagnostics approach that identify which institution capability should be prioritized first, and what criteria will you use to distinguish between capability that are prerequisites and GVC upgrading and those that can be development incrementally during the upgrading process?
Okay. Do we have anybody else online with a question? I think we might have more questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Sorry, who?
Zianda.
Sianda. Okay.
Okay, Zianda's question is, much of the literature on institutional capabilities for GVC-oriented policies focuses on infrastructure, taxation, logistics, and firm upgrading. How should labor fit into these policy frameworks in ways that not only support competitiveness, but also protect workers and promotes social upgrading?
Did you hear this, Carlo? You heard the question?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Okay.
There's
And
another one.
okay.
One more in the chat, and then Elvis has his hand. Okay, one more question, Carlo, from the chat. It says, can GVC take into account a multi-layer macro, meso, micro, co-drivable and collaborative decision-making approach? Namely, one, to stay up to date of any actualized information at each context level, and two, to ensure a true participative co-decision making from the international decision maker to the local people. And then Elvis.
Yes, let's take the last question or comment from Elvis.
Thanks, Rasmus, and thanks, Carlo. Always a pleasure listening to you. But also sort of listening to how you weave in case studies into some of these theoretical things that you've written. on over the years, but also linking it back to some of the fundamental issues that developing countries, Latin America, Africa, and East Asia are facing. A small question. So when production was moving to Southeast Asia in, I believe, the 80s, 90s, thereabout, correct me if I get if I get the dates wrong. The expectation was labor wages will rise. So then once wages rise in these countries, Vietnam, Philippines, production would automatically hopefully move to Africa. What we do see now is friendshoring and nearshoring. I think that I read a piece, I think an interview you gave that either in the week or last week, discussing the importance of nearshoring in the era of the geopolitics. So what we do see now is the overriding nature of geopolitics influencing how this transition is occurring. It was supposed to move from China to East Asia, Southeast Asia, and then to Africa. That hasn't happened. So the question is, should we be focusing on national GVC policies, given that some global policies may be influencing how GVC occurs, but also who leads in GVCs, or we should thinking a lot more about now some issues around regional policies where we are also trying to take advantage of some of these new dimensions of nearshoring and friendshoring. Thanks.
Okay, over to you, Carlo. There was a lot of questions there, so you can be selective in which ones you want to address and emphasize.
Sure.
But over to you.
Thank you, Rasmus, and thank you everyone for this very insightful questions. I mean, I'm sure you'll understand I will not be able to answer all these questions, and a lot of these questions will require a lot of additional research and emphasis. So I don't have the solutions for many of the very, very clever insights that you suggested. The Mohammed was emphasizing the relevance of power, and he was wondering whether I'm underestimating power. I hope I'm not. I'm fully aware that this is a big problem. Unfortunately, this is an issue that traditional economics is often ignored. So it's something that I'm a trained economist, and we've been trained by looking at models and looking at incentives and how actors respond to incentives and maximize some objective. And then there was something else that was developed elsewhere, which was the political influence. There was the policy decisions that were sometimes oriented by a rational objective of pursuing some goal. In other cases, it was just the expression of different interests and different lobbies and different electoral interests and so on. So definitely power needs to be part of our analysis. I would expect that coming to Elvis' question at the end, I mean, what he's talking about is essentially the power playing out at the international level with strategies of companies and countries influencing the allocation of resources and investment, and our theories of comparative advantage, which need to take into account second best suboptimal economic setups that respond to first best policy objectives of some kind, be it security, be it autonomy, be it independence, and so on. So we need to update our analysis. We need to be more explicit in introducing in our studies power at the national level, at the supranational level, the implications for business strategies, and so on. So clearly, the world today is very different from what it was 50 years ago, when the East Asian countries that are now rich and highly developed started to develop. Some of the policies they could implement at the time are not available anymore, and rules have been changing over the years. So we really need to constantly update our understanding. And many of the questions that came from the audience also have to do with how to achieve coordination. How can actors coordinate their activities? Hopefully, government can coordinate other people's activities, given that many of our countries are resource constrained and need to develop some capabilities. They cannot develop all capabilities. There's a need to choose, and therefore it's not easy to choose. And choice is we're doomed to choose. Choice is necessary. And again, the answer is not general. It cannot be cannot apply to any circumstance. It needs to be specific, and it needs to engage the different actors at play. I mean, the examples I mentioned, the case studies that I briefly analyzed in the last part of my lecture, are examples where the capacity to coordinate, the capacity to convene, to develop the necessary knowledge, and so on, came from, in every case, came from different setups and different coordinations. So it's in the Peruvian example came as a result of an explicit idea of a crazy minister of the economy that came from a business sector and wanted to do something concrete and pragmatic, and managed for some time to achieve that, and gradually improve the technology of developing these executive boards and the meetings and the kind of decisions that needed to be taken. Whereas in other cases, I mean, the Kenyan cut flower industry has been developing institutions that have to do with quality and infrastructure, and there must have been some political economy condition in the country that made these institutions the right one to start and coordinate and lead this process of orchestrating the different interests, and so on. In Australia, the emergence of a newly signed trade agreement forced the country and the government to adopt a specific policy, create through a specific project a secretariat that was in charge of coordinating and agreeing and convening actors from the two different countries, and that was that. In that case, that secretary had the power because there was something happening right away in that specific moment that needed to be exploited, and therefore that gave them credibility and power to convene and start planning the appropriate actions and the right capabilities that need to be developed to actually implement the trade agreement successful. Of course, labor issues need to be part of the story. I mean, when I presented this taxonomy of GVC-oriented policies, there were two elements: one on social and labor conditions, and another one on resilience, that I later ignored and focused on the first two segments of the table of the two kinds of GVC-oriented policies. But there's a lot of literature, and there's definitely the need to understand better how to include labor in all this, and how to make GVC, as we know, they've been a conduit for exploitation in many countries and in many instances. So this needs to deserve the necessary attention in our research. I didn't devote that much attention in my speech, but I'm sure this is something absolutely necessary. I'll stop here for the moment.
Okay, thank you for these excellent insights, Carlo. Let's move to this room. Do we have people in this room who would like to ask questions? There's absolute silence. Okay, so that means that maybe I can take the floor. I have many questions, so I cannot ask all of them. But as I said, I was really inspired by what you were talking about in this lecture, Carlo. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, in a way, what comes before what you have been talking about. You have been talking about, to a large extent, sort of institutional capabilities for design and implementation of GVC-oriented policies. But I would like to turn the attention to identification. So how do you know what to target in your policy? We can think about horizontally, which sectors should we aim at? And we can think about vertically, within these sectors, which specific governance functions and tasks should we aim at? And then once we have identified those, all of your specific issues coming in about participation versus value capture and so on. But this idea about identification, I think, is very important. And I want to throw in another element, which of course is, one thing is about, let's say, foresight capabilities, in the sense that we know that the green economy is expanding, and therefore we need to identify tasks that are somehow then related to the green economy because there will be demand in the future. But that also, of course, has to be matched to your specific capabilities, to your specific resources, and so on. So this matchmaking process, apart from just foresight, obviously with your background in capabilities-related literature, you will agree with me. But how do you do this? What are the kind of tools that we can draw on in order to, on the one hand, match what could be opportunities for the future, and on the other hand, what do we have to offer where we have advantages compared to other countries? Let me just stop with that. I want to also give the chance to Jonas to ask a question. You raised your hand.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Jonas Pfister from Humboldt University at Berlin. And I have a question that is related also what Rasmus just mentioned, and also Mohammed. So the question of basically the politics of this whole theory. And my question is a bit, we're obviously looking at, as you mentioned as well, Carlo, the situation of trade-offs between specializing in certain skills under resource constraints. And I'm wondering here, this is maybe also related to the question of foresight studies, but also sectors will fight for, and are already fighting for, attention of politics of developing these particular skills, right? Whether it's access to European markets or whatever. And here the question is really for me, how can you integrate this question also of, how are skills then actually allocated? What are the decisions? Who decides which skills get implemented, basically, and which basically global value chains are advanced then?
Yeah.
Thanks for that question. So over to you, Carlo.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very insightful, very useful, and a lot of food for thought. The issue of targeting has been behind both development economics. No, how should countries choose? Can countries choose? Should markets choose? Should this preconception against industrial policy, where mainly based on the lack of capacity of governments to choose and pick winners. So governments should not pick winners, because they would not have the capability to select, whereas markets are much better equipped to select the beneficiaries of public policies. And then the big issue of the, again, preconception that all subsidies will necessarily generate a rent-seeking strategy by private enterprises to capture the rents and give nothing in return. Many different methods have been proposed. One of the recent methods that have been proposed is the idea of which is behind economic complexity, and the idea that a country should look at what they're good at doing and good at exporting, mainly because economic complexity is still measured with international trade data. And this would allow to infer which capabilities the country has because they've been exporting, and perhaps they are one of the few countries exporting, and therefore they're supposed to have stronger capabilities in that specific sector or segment and so on. And the policy implications would be that you cannot do jumps from one point in the map to another point in the map of economic complexity, but you need to move gradually, and you need to move little steps. Which is reasonable. That reminds me of conferences I gave, say, in the desert of Argentina, where people were asking me, how do we set up a cluster of microelectronics here? And then I said, did you ever do any manufacturing? No, we've only done wine and agriculture. That's hard. The question was, well, move gradually. Don't think that, consider your manufacturing history and where it's reasonable to move. So on the one hand, I agree, some graduality should be encompassed in this strategy, but I would not underplay the role of the famous strategic bets. Countries betting on sectors that would gain competitiveness after a while. And that's the story of several East Asian countries. That the shipping companies developed in South Korea were not the result of a gradual move from rice production that was occurring in South Korea in the 50s and 60s to the next obvious technology. So this idea of strategic bets needs to be included, I think. Of course, it is costly because you cannot bet on many different things. Betting on any specific sector or function is costly because you need to devote resources, and you cannot bet on many different things because you don't have the resources. The logic of a portfolio approach whereby invest in 100 startups, maybe one becomes Amazon, and then you're happy. No. It's very hard to that this actually takes place. So governments, face the struggle of having limited resources. So in this case, I think that there's common sense considerations. There's convening different actors and deciding together, which is difficult, but that's what policy is about. Having different actors around the table and listening and trying to weigh the lobbying interests with the serious expectations of improving competitiveness and looking at what you have and what you could reasonably do and what requires to make a jump and move a bit further away from what you've been doing so far and so on. So a bit of trial and error. A bit of there's methods also in this. I think something which is an area which is typically underestimated in public policy is the experimentation in public policy. So paradoxically, all governments, all international organizations want to have 100% success score in whatever public policy or whatever loan they finance. And that's impossible. So it's faked, and therefore this leads to either investing in a less ambitious project, so projects that it is obvious they would get some positive results, but perhaps they wouldn't advance the economy that much. So introducing some elements of experimentation, selecting some areas with some foresight, with some convening of different actors, and then financing. And then I like very much the one of the sentences of Danny Roderick where he emphasized that the challenge is not to invest, not to choose where to invest and then devote resources to that, but it is eventually to withdraw resources. So if you get it wrong, if you decide that there's 4 value chains that are worth, or 4 segments are worth investing, and then maybe 2 of them totally fail, it should have the strength and the capacity to withdraw resources. Tremendously difficult. Impossible. In my country, it would be impossible. But at the same time, that's something that makes a lot of sense, and that's the challenge of public policy, industrial policy. So trial, error, withdrawing resources, experimenting, selecting together with a lot of interactions and a lot of engagement of different actors, and expecting them some of what you do will fail, provided that something else will succeed. I mean, South Korea or Taiwan are examples of tremendous failures. They wasted a lot of money, and China is so successful also because they've been investing in everything. I mean, that's the story that most of the industrial development has been focusing on special economic zones, but at the same time, they've been investing in research. They've improved the logistics. They've given subsidies for innovation. They've been attracting foreign investors. They've been developing local firms. They've been improving schools and training schools. They've been doing everything because they had the resources, because part of the economy there was a tremendous surplus of labor. And the economy stayed at levels of poverty for many years that allowed accumulation that could then be invested in many different things until they managed to find out what would be successful. So I mean, I realize a lot of common sense, a lot of tedious and hard work to figure out what could work and then test it and try it and experiment and withdraw and invest again and modify the choices. But I think that's the only tedious and tiring way of moving ahead.
Thank you so much, Carlo. Yes, I was thinking when you were talking here now just at the end about the case of batteries in China. And, of course, now in China, they are sitting very, very heavily on the entire battery market. But you have to realize that they went through literally hundreds of bankruptcies in that sector.
Yeah.
So the level of experimentation and willingness to accept failure was immense, but of course, this is also, as you mentioned, a very, very costly process, and you need to have deep pockets to sustain such an effort that you saw in that specific case. Okay, Carlo, we need to end here, unfortunately. I want to thank you profoundly for joining us. I think we have been extremely privileged to have you here as a keynote speaker. I have certainly learned a lot. So thank you very much, Carlo, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for inviting me, and happy to continue this discussion anytime. And thank you. Good luck with the conference.
Thank you. So what will happen now is that Phumzile will create 2 breakout rooms. And if you can hear me in the next room, Phumzile, maybe you need to explain to people what they need to do. I do know that she's creating now 2 breakout rooms where we will have the 2 sessions. So we will have one which is called Stream A, which is on drivers of structural transformation, urbanization, infrastructure, human capital, and green innovation. And then we will have stream B, which is called Designing and Politicizing Green Industrial Policy in Africa. So these two streams will have their own room. And Phumzile, can you please explain to people how they select either of these rooms? Or does somebody else know?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. So as Rasmus has said, I've created 2 breakout rooms. I'll open them just now as soon as I finish explaining. I've made them such that you can choose which breakout room you would like to attend. So either stream A, drivers of structural transformation, or stream B, designing and politicizing green IP. Rasmus, for your room, that will be stream B. For those who are in Johannesburg in person, the room that Rasmus will be in is stream B, designing and politicizing green IP. And then stream A, drivers of structural transformation, is the room in which I am. If you can't see the breakout rooms, in the bottom panel of your Zoom window, there's either something written breakout rooms that you can click on, or if you click on more, you should be able to see breakout rooms there. If you open that, then as when I've opened the breakout rooms, you'll be able to see them. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms now. Please do click on the breakout room that you want to go into. If you cannot see the breakout room, please write in the chat, and then which room you want to go into, then I will assign you myself. So I'm opening the rooms now.
Okay, great. So just to be clear, those of us who are in stream B, we stay in this room. For those who are, yes, okay.
Yes.
And I think we have some people who will be chairs for each of these sessions, isn't it?
Yes, Sandil is your chair.
Okay, great. Well, so I think we can decide collectively. We have 1 hour and 20 minutes. And as I understood it, we have an imposter, so to speak, somebody who could not present in the afternoon, who wants to join in this session and present the paper in this session. So we in fact do have 3 presentations. So that is in fact Mohammed, who will be presenting also in our session. So as I understand it, we have these 2 presentations plus Mohammed, so we have 1 hour and 20 minutes. So I'm not sure exactly. I think if maybe people can present in, let's say, 15 minutes or so. And yes. Well, I think so. I think my preference would be that we have the 3 presentations in a row, and then we can open up for. I have some comments. At least I've been assigned a discussion, so hopefully I'll have some comments, and then I think we should open it up for discussion. Yes.
Can we start with the she created a paper room.
I'm not sure. I guess we need to somehow join
Okay.
the breakout
I'll
room.
join you. You click join, yeah? Yeah.